Blackhawks fans, welcome into the Four Feathers podcast. It's been a minute. Johnny Nani here alongside my guys, GM Ron and Tony on tap. How we doing this Sunday evening, my friends?
Doing well, gentlemen. Good to see you guys.
There you go, Ron. Doing well as well here. Crack 'em. Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Let's talk some hockey.
Yeah, boys, it's been a little bit, been a minute, like I said, but we've got a lot of Blackhawks rumblings, some happenings that have taken place since we last got on these airwaves, especially in the broadcast booth. So we'll discuss that. There's some rumors flying around about a potential free agency signing and one that may not be happening. The NHL Draft Combine just happened this past week. A little bit of news and notes coming out of that. We'll talk a little bit of Stanley Cup that's going on. Maybe give a few predictions on that front and wrap it up with what's on tap next, as we usually do. Before we do any of that, make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube, on Tap Sportsnet there. Give us a follow on the socials at Sox on Tap, or excuse me, at Four Feathers Pod and at On Tap Sportsnet. I'm in baseball mode. And check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Boys, like I said, been a little bit. Been in baseball mode here, but we got some Hawks news. Chris Vosters out, Rick Ball in. Wasn't expecting this change. Your guys' reactions?
I think it was a surprise. I think you nailed it on the head, Johnny. This was very much out of left field. I don't think, there was no... Sometimes you get the little rumblings, right, of like, oh, the Blackhawks are, talking to so-and-so, talking to so-and-so. There was nothing. I mean, it was all of a sudden breaking news. Chris Vosters is out. Rick Ball is now the new voice of the Chicago Blackhawks. A great get. I mean, Ball is incredibly respected amongst, the world of hockey in terms of hockey broadcasting, a part of Hockey Night in Canada, which is obviously a huge deal there. A phenomenal get for the Blackhawks, but out of left field for sure.
Yeah, it was a bit out of left field. I agree with that. But on the same note, there's the new TV station that's going to be a thing here in Chicago coming up soon. So if there was a time for the Hawks to reevaluate talent, I would assume that Vosters' contract was probably up with the NBC at the end of last season. And would have to be renegotiated to go into the new TV channel that the Blackhawks, White Sox, and Bulls are going to be on. So it sort of made sense with the timing of this as they're laying the foundation for what this new network is going to be. There's been a ton of fan feedback on Vosters, and not all of that has been positive. The Blackhawks do a pretty good job of listening to fan feedback. So I wasn't entirely surprised by it. Just sort of came out of left field, like Ron said, because our guy, Pat Comiskey, our enforcer here on the show, had texted me that morning to do a power rankings article of all the play-by-play guys that are in the city of Chicago. You can check that out at ontapsportsnet.com. I think he did an excellent job on that. But midway through writing that, I'm pretty sure it's when that announcement came. It's been a really hot topic in the city of Chicago when it comes to play-by-play guys. John Schriffen up on the Sox side of things, Chris Vosters on the Blackhawks side of things. I don't think either of those guys have really lent themselves to the roles as much as people have expected out of these guys, because we've had a city of great play-by-play guys for so long. It's a rough industry to work in. So I don't know if it's exactly, to me, a surprise that he's gone already. More so than it is, this is a result of this really didn't work out, and the Hawks pulled the plug, I think, at the right time as this rebuild is taking shape. Wish Chris nothing but the best. It seems like a good dude, but at the same point in time, I think we were getting into meme territory too much with Chris Vosters, and that's when things are not going well. It's when you're becoming a meme. So, Johnny, what are your thoughts on it, man?
Yeah, well said. I thought it was interesting that over at the Chicago Sun-Times, the reasoning for this, and they said reported tension between Vosters and Darren Pang. That's what really caught my eye. I'm not entirely shocked, Tony, for all those factors that you mentioned. With the new Chicago Sports Network, probably would, if they were going to make a change, would be the time to. So that makes sense in that regard. But hearing this, that there was some tension there, which I could see happening, but also they did a fairly good job of masking that. Paying never really on air was I don't know, sort of standoffish towards Vosters is what I'm trying to get at there. So that was kind of the interesting, kind of more surprising part for me there. And the feedback from fans too. I mean, I think that's, way to get, I think it was, I don't know exactly what the source is on there, but obviously they took notice of the memes, Tony, and we had generated a few of them ourselves, but some moments lent themselves to it. And a score. I mean, come on, that is meme-worthy material. And it got rightfully ripped to shreds, though, because it just hits the ears wrong. We had discussed it on a number of times throughout the season. That term in a hockey game after a goal is scored hits the ears wrong. And unfortunately, Vosters would go back to it. And it was just kind of like a bad tendency of his, and he wasn't a hockey guy through and through. We know this, like his experience, right? Especially at least where I had like really first heard of him was calling Big Ten network football games, right? So college football, I think he does fine in that role when it's a Saturday 2:00 Indiana versus Purdue game, but put him in front of one of the fastest sports in the world there. It's going to be a tough adjustment there. Like I said, I think he means well. He did his homework. That's another thing Comiskey mentioned in his article. So he started to get more prepared in terms of what was there, but hockey's a fast game, and if you can't relay that information quick enough, you're going to find yourself in some of those awkward spots. So in the end, I think the Hawks righted a mistake.
Yeah, that's a great point too that you bring up, Johnny, with the speed of the sport. Like everybody was like, oh, he's not good anymore, and the Hawks went with a guy that has been in the sport for decades of experience. And that's something that people are accustomed to. That's what Pat Foley was. That's what John Weideman is. Like Blackhawks fans have gotten used to that over the course of the last, 3+ decades now of hockey. I think that was the biggest piece of it. Like, I don't think Vosters is a bad broadcaster when, like you said, like it's a college football game or maybe a slower sport, but hockey is a different beast in itself. As somebody who's called games before, like I've tried to mentally keep up with it, like on my own sometimes watching Hawks games of like, what would I say here? What would I say there? It is by far the hardest sport to keep pace with and be able to relay the information, like you said, Johnny. So
really gives you an appreciation for John Weideman, doesn't it?
It does, especially because the radio is even harder, right? At least with TV, you can give a little more breaks because you can see the action that's occurring. It's more to supplement what's happening in front of your eyes. But when you have to paint the picture, it's the hardest sport to paint the picture of. And like you said, Johnny, absolutely gives a lot of appreciation to Weideman. And Tony, just quickly back to your point, it didn't even dawn on me with the Chicago Sports Network. So that's a great call out as well, just because they are effectively, this is the time if you're going to make any changes when there's brand new contracts being signed with this new organization as new network when it starts in October. No better time than the present to be able to say, hey, well, your contract's up. We can let you leave. Bye. There's no termination. There's none of that. It's just, hey, you're a free agent now. And, they go get their guy in Rick Ball. So a brand new voice, but a very respected voice joining the Blackhawks now in Mr. Ball.
And I appreciated the honesty from the Hawks end of things, because they could have just painted this as, Chris, we're not renewing Chris with the new network. There was we looked at the fan feedback. There was potentially some tension between Pang and Vosters. And it sort of seemed like there was tension between Sharp last season and Chris Vosters in the first year of Vosters' tenure as the broadcaster as well. Not sure what that was all about, but obviously it was sort of a rough role for him with some musical chairs going on in the analyst role. So, I mean, it was just a tough draw. It didn't work out. And as Johnny said, this seemed like a righted wrong on a few different levels. So, I mean, I'm fine with it, and I'm excited to hear Rick Ball.
Yeah, let's talk Rick Ball real quick. I was just going to mention 10 seasons, Flames announcer, also did Hockey Night in Canada national broadcasts, was named the Sportsnet Western lead broadcaster in 2013. Guys, I like watching my fair share of late night West Coast games. The Flames are on the West Coast out there. So I've enjoyed hearing Rick Ball's calls. Some of them had to be national for the Sportsnet game if that was one of those. But on the Flames, I enjoyed watching the Flames, especially when Matthew Tkachuk, Johnny Gaudreau were there. So I think he does a really good job of painting the whole picture picture. And like there was a great sequence just from this past season of overtime game between Boston and Calgary, and it was back and forth action, and he called it flawlessly and really added some excitement to the moment. So I'm looking forward to hearing that, him calling Blackhawks instances of that.
Yeah, and I think he fitting with Darren Pang is going to be such just an effortless fit. Very much like what Skoke said in the comments. And first off, shout out to everybody that's watching along and joining us in the comment section as always. That's just it's an all-time booth. I mean, you look at two guys that are national voices of the sport. It says a lot now. It's crazy how, when the Foley announcement came out and then they lost Olczyk, I still remember talking to the both of you, and it was like, it's at the end of an era and the Blackhawks are downgrading in the booth and it's never going to be the same. And it's like, wow, in a little over 2 seasons now, like they've very much, Johnny, like you said, kind of righted a wrong here and brought in two of the most respected names in the sport now to be, both your color analysts as well as your play-by-play boys.
Couldn't have said that better, Ron. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be Pat Foley and Eddie O with Panger and Ball, but it's going to be a pretty premier product in terms of broadcast booth talent that we have here now. I know this probably has more to do with the TV production side and the new TV channel, but you hope that this change also ushers in sort of a better product on the ice as well. Right. Obviously, there's stuff to talk about later on in the show, but I wonder how much of that went into the decision making of, hey, we need to up this product. Things on the ice are going to be a little bit better. I don't want to call Chris Vosters the rebuild broadcaster, but that's sort of now what he is in the chapters of Blackhawks history. He was the rebuild broadcaster. And now we're going to enter a new era. So I'd like to start this season off with some higher expectations, and the ball is now in Kyle Davidson's court to make that happen.
The ball.
I don't think Rick Ball is going to want to come here and call the same 2 seasons that we just saw the last 2 years. That probably wasn't on his agenda, and you'd have to assume that somewhere in the discussions, he knows a little bit of what this Hawks team trajectory is going to look like over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and Ball directly cited Bedard, right, as one of his 4 reasons for taking the job too in the news release. So kind of along the same lines there.
On that topic, one Mr. Connor Bedard, I'm just gonna say it, and once again, Chris Vosters, nice guy. Hope he does well in his next endeavor. But isn't it kind of it sucks that Connor Bedard's rookie season was with him on the mic. Now, when we go back and have those highlights, it's like I'm going to be looking for if you can somehow rip the John Weideman calls and match them up to that. That's what I want to do for historical video purposes. But that's just a side tangent thought that I had on that.
There's going to be no more raspy Bedard as he gets the puck and brings it into the zone.
I hope Rick Ball got off the boards to Bedard.
I hope Rick Ball got one of those
to score
just for a game.
Yeah. All right, that's changes in the booth, so you can go check out more about that at ontapsportsnet.com. All right, it's GM Ron season. Off season's not officially here, not the new league year, as we are in the Stanley Cup final still right now. But Blackhawks made a trade in between our last episode and now, and that was swapping picks with the Islanders. Tell us all about it, GM Ron, because Kyle Davidson made some comments about it and didn't think it was a huge deal, but some other outlets seem to think there may be something to it. Go ahead.
100%. Yeah. At the end of the day, Kyle Davidson said, hey, this was an opportunity that we had to improve draft position. We've had, a draft like last year where they had a ton of picks and it was a lot of quantity. And now they're like, hey, maybe it's okay to lose a pick and still have more quality. Still plenty of picks in this draft. I believe it's 8 picks still in this upcoming draft. So, and 6 of those being in the first 3 rounds. That's where they're going to really want to get that talent. So being able to move up, 4 spots ultimately in the second round, you're getting effectively what most people will put on their big, top 50 boards of NHL draft prospects. You're going to get 2 of those guys now with moving up. And one of them is going to be, just a little higher up now. Now maybe you got a chance to get a guy that you didn't think was going to be there 20 at 18. As you alluded to a little bit though, Johnny, the other outlets of other places are like, well, what could this mean? Are they going to, trade one of these picks for a player? And I think that's always on the table. I think Kyle Davidson himself would tell you if somebody brought him a trade discussion that involved one of those two picks, he would probably entertain it. It might not happen, but he would at least entertain it. But, to me, I wouldn't mind seeing that second first round pick move. I can think of one position in particular that it could help address, and that could be goaltender potentially. I think there's some goalies to be had this year, and that pick could certainly help a lot of teams if they so chose. But I ultimately think this really is just like hey, we're just giving ourselves a better opportunity for better quality, and good on him, because I feel like it's very rare that we see trades happen like this where it's just picks for picks before the draft. So kind of a unique little, outcome here with and a very unlikely trade partner, I would say as well, in a team like the New York Islanders, who very clearly needs to rebuild their farm. It's an older, aging team that's probably going to need to be blown up soon. Why not add another pick to the fray in the first two rounds? So I think it's a good move all around for both sides. And, people are going to read into it and think it's something else. But I think at the end of the day, we might just be looking at Kyle Davidson just wanting to improve the position to get a better player potentially at both of those selections.
Funny part about this is both could be true. Both scenarios could be true.
Mhm.
Like he could just legitimately just wanted that, like in what he says in his comments. But I feel like there's always a potential for something veiled with Kyle Davidson. He has a good poker face. I'll give him that. He's pretty good at, shielding what he's going to do
Really good poker
in
face.
terms of his moves. He doesn't really signal a whole lot. I mean, sure, there might be some organizational directives, like very clearly, made it clear that this team needs to improve the on-ice product for this upcoming season. Totally get it. But that also just makes sense in terms of logic, right? If you're going through a rebuild, you want to continue taking steps up the ladder, right? But for some of these, I don't know. I really don't. And whenever I hear someone like Elliot Friedman, then speculate about it, or you get Frank Saravelli, just jabbing in there about, this could be on the move, something to keep an eye on. I mean, those guys are, for the most part, I would say close to 97 to 98% accurate. So it's it makes you think twice. It's just what I got. So I don't know what's going to happen, but who knows? It's all on the table right now.
If it's not Bobby Margarita, it's not hashtag confirmed.
Well, it's 100% hashtag confirmed, right? Yeah. That's where we're at with that. So we'll see how that one shakes out. As this is coming out now, there's some news yesterday. Salary cap is increasing. First significant bump since the COVID season. So ceiling of the salary cap will be at 88 million, and the floor will be at 65 million per cap friendly, which is unfortunately going to be shutting down after a few days into free agency. Blackhawks are at a projected approximate 53.9 million right now. That's plenty of space for GM Kyle Davidson, Kyle from Chicago, and our GM Ron to play with. Ron, how excited are you about this?
I'm incredibly excited. And I'll be honest with you, I think this really does change a narrative on something that we're going to talk about here on our rundown. I'm just going to preface that a little bit, because I don't know if any GM was truly prepared this season, at least, for this big of a job. There was a lot of discussion because of the new TV deals. They think that, just naturally, now that COVID is kind of in the rearview mirror as well, that this cap will continue to climb. And they're expecting it to climb pretty significantly over the next 4 or 5 years. But I don't think everybody was expecting this big of a jump in year one. And quite frankly, I think it does so much to this offseason now. I think a lot of teams that the Hawks could have potentially poached for some talent and maybe another pick or something like that just to take on a contract, I think that's largely done. And maybe Kyle Davidson had a hunch that was going to happen, and that's why he did so much of that last year with guys like Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno. Perhaps that's the case, and I am flabbergasted in the best way possible, because now I think also for the first time ever, think about last year's free agency. It was one of the tougher years, but it was still chaos and crazy, and there was a lot of smaller deals being taken. I think with this bump, we get our first real offseason of some of those holy shit type deals that get signed at the NHL level. And I think that's something the sport has desperately missed. So as an off-season enthusiast, because my season starts in the off-season, I am very excited about this increase for this summer, because July 1st, my Christmas morning just got even better.
Let's just dive right into that one that you prefaced, Ron. Jake Guentzel rumors are now aplenty surrounding the Blackhawks. And at first, it felt like it was just like what a bold prediction on Elliot Friedman's part, just mentioning him in passing on the 32 Thoughts podcast. But then you get a little bit more to back it up. And he says, what do you cite? The Midwest ties and the Blackhawks needing to move things along here. And once again, consider the source. Elliot Friedman, for the most part, knows what he's talking about when it comes to the hockey landscape all over it. There's at first I was like, that's just kind of wild, throwing it out there just to pass time because it was the dead week, right? The bye week in between the conference finals and the Stanley Cup final. But now I'm thinking more about it, and it's like, this could be the type of guy that everybody said we need more offense. Well, Jake Guentzel, that's a point scorer there. There's plenty to be considered that comes along with this, but your guys' thoughts on the potential of Jake Guentzel even being on the Hawks' radar now?
I think honestly, the crazy part is, Johnny, is, we as fans didn't know the new cap number until the announcement. I think these GMs were told toward the end of the year where they were expecting it to fall, like very confidently, like, hey, it's going to be somewhere in this $500,000 range, but it's going to be really damn close to this. Now, I think maybe that helped spark some of those rumors, because what we were largely hearing from Kyle Davidson about why they wanted to keep deals to 2 years effectively at this point, maybe 3, is because when Connor Bedard's new contract is up. But now that they're getting physical proof that the cap is growing in a healthy and positive direction, yes, the max contract grows a little bit with that too, but not that extremely. Maybe there's a chance where they try to get him extended in that third year of the deal now, because things are so rushing along. Get him at maybe a little more friendly of a number, quote unquote. And then all of a sudden, if you do sign some more long-term deals, they aren't going to be as cap impacting anymore now when the Bedard and Korchinski and some of these contracts come due in a few years. I really think it kind of opened up new possibilities that Davidson, I think truly Davidson preached during the offseason. I think he preached from his heart and what he was planning. Hey, we're not going out and signing big money long-term deals this summer. If we'll overpay the guy a little bit for the next 2 years, but other than that, we're keeping it. I think he's a little more open now to being like, you know what? If I can go get a guy to start getting it integrated into the culture now, and then can sort out all the money with the guys you need to keep, and then go spend again on another heavy run to fill some holes, completely changes the Kyle Davidson plan, in my opinion. And it might just be me getting myself excited for this, but I really do think we are going to see what Kyle Davidson said potentially go for the first time, actually go against his own word, essentially, because of this late change now with the salary cap increasing. So, and Johnny, you said it best. If Friedman's talking about it, it's got some legs. It might not be crazy legs. It's
right.
Not a millipede
hashtag
here,
confirmed,
but there's some legs. Yeah, exactly. There's some legs. Somebody's whispering about it because somebody's checked in with somebody and hearsay gets around. They have all their hearsay. It's just to keep the public involved in the drama and the gossip of the NHL. That's all that the insiders do. Just like all the insiders in Hollywood, it's the exact same way.
Yeah.
And for good reason. There's a lot of kind of like fun little things that are happening that, he said, she said type stuff is going to be fun, and it's got some legs.
Yeah. Tony, your thoughts? Jake Guentzel?
I'm more inclined to say that, Ron said everything here than give my own take on this. The only thing I'll add to it is, Ron started to go down the path of Kyle Davidson talking about or going against his own word for the first time. That's exciting for Blackhawks fans, and should be, because I've been the first one on this show to sit here and say, this needs to go a lot faster than it's fucking going right now. And this gives you that leeway to start to move in that direction. It doesn't mean that Guentzel's going to be the guy, but if they're poking around in that range, that, you start to set that floor a little bit higher for what your offseason can be. You have to get to the cap floor. You're just over 10 million away from that. So there's going to be some good deals signed here. But this gives you potentially an additional player on top of that, like a good player too. And that's really, really exciting to see how he's going to maneuver all of this. But long story short, yeah, this is really good for the Blackhawks to see the cap moving like this. I almost wish, and we all went through this at a certain point in time during the Cup run years. But watching that salary cap stay stagnant in the NHL just hurt so much. This is the first time, like, really, as Blackhawks fans, where you can sit there and be like, wow, the cap is working for us instead of against us. And that's a good spot to be in.
Yes, 100%. I'm just going to go a little hypothetical here. I'm thinking Jake Guentzel, if he signs, I doubt it's going to be in the short-term range. So like you said, Ron, maybe these options are now opened up for the Blackhawks. So if you get a longer-term Jake Guentzel contract, what I'm most excited about is not for this upcoming season. Sure, it'd be great to have him, have some more firepower around Bedard and all of that. Jake Guentzel is a great playoff performer. When the Blackhawks are back in the playoffs in, a couple of years down the road, we all want it to be, that guy is a gamer in the playoffs. And that is the type of guy who will become a fan favorite then. If he's, sure he will be, just with the contract. Everybody knows his pedigree from his time in Pittsburgh, and then he got traded to Carolina now as the rental at the end of this year. I get all that, but how people latched on to Brian Bickle in 2013. Everyone got really excited by Andrew Shaw in certain times. Feel like same energy could surround one Jake Guentzel in the Indian head sweater. Just thinking down the road. That's all hypothetical. All has to happen, but that's where my mind goes, and I think about integral pieces of a important playoff run, and he would be one of them.
Johnny, can I tease your mind here really quick with that Jake Guentzel playoff performer? I just want to share some numbers here with you. In the 25 games played,
are you on cat friendly?
I am. Stop it. Don't open up those wounds yet. In 25 games played in that first Cup run with the Penguins he had, which was his rookie season, he was a 33-point player in 40 games in the regular season, 21 and 25 with 13 goals in the playoffs. The next playoff, Pittsburgh doesn't go all the way, only played 12 games. But after a 48-point season and 82 games, 21 and 12 in the playoffs.
Insane.
And then on top of that, even just the last two playoffs, Pittsburgh didn't play a ton of games, but in 7 games in 21-22, 10 points in those 7 games. And then this past year on a loaded, Carolina Hurricanes team in the playoffs, 11 games, 9 points. He's really, really good when the weather starts to warm up in playoff hockey.
You backed my take up there, and like I said, it's just where my mind goes. All right, last thing on this, our guy Skokes always chipping in some ideas here. I enjoy this. He says, I'd rather trade for Marty Necas than sign Guentzel, younger and better, in his opinion. All fair opinions. I totally understand it, and I think we discussed this in our Hawks room the other day that it is time for that Carolina core to be torn down. So if there's a Marty Necas trade to be had there, I'm all ears on it as well.
Maybe that's where the 18th pick gets involved if we're talking about moving that pick like we did a little bit earlier. Maybe.
Yeah. It's a fun time of the year. Ron. I can see your attachment to it. Okay. It's also NHL Draft Combine season, and Artyom Levshinov is gaining some steam at the NHL Combine. It seems like a very outgoing sort of personality. The media seemed to love him. Said he shook everybody's hand before they were asking him questions, and he, injected some humor into his responses, and, was joking about the pull-ups and all of that. But does this lead you to believe that the Hawks are more inclined for Levshinov at 2? Obviously, there were the dinner reports. There were the, only team to meet with him there. So there's still a decision to be made, and Davidson made that clear in his comments. But after this week, mind swayed at all?
I want to know if Tony wants to take this one first, because I feel like we might have a little bit of conflicting thoughts on this topic.
Sure. I don't know if the decision's been made yet. It's definitely something that signals there's, mutual interest between the two sides. I think Levshinov wants to come to Chicago. I think he sort of made that clear with some of his comments, maybe a little veiled, but, just the way he's getting along with the media. Obviously, Demidov's not at the draft or the combine here. So you don't get that type of crew of media people and Davidson and the potential draft pick all in the same spot to have a media feast frenzy over the guy. I sort of look at this and say, what else are Chicago Blackhawks writers who are there going to write about other than what is right in front of your face? That's sort of what I read out of this is, he was the one that's there. He's obviously the top name. But at the same time, I did see reports that they were going to go down, I believe, to Florida and talk with Demidov as well. And you're probably not going to get the same media brigade to come follow whatever's going on there.
What is it? Gold Star Showcase, I think. Those Russian players. Yeah. So, I mean, it's
obviously there's good quotes that came out of this. I love the cracking the joke about, having, a couple of beers or whatever, obviously. As on Tap Sportsnet, we love that. Like, he gets along. I'm sure we can get some good quotes out of him if he does wind up being the second overall selection. But I definitely think that this one's going to come more down to the wire. You don't know if you can really go wrong with either of these guys at this point because they're both incredibly talented young players who have good pedigrees. You're not going to know whether you chose the right one until 4 or 5 years from now. So, I'm not sold that it's Levshunov. Obviously, there's interest there from the Hawks in him, and it seems him in the Hawks as well. But I wouldn't read much into this unless you had both guys in the same room, and then you see, you can read the room and see which one they're gravitating towards. And I think this plays into the Hawks' favor a little bit to keep the mystery up that he wasn't involved in this. So I'm still sticking back and saying, I'm not sold that he's now the guy just because there was 15 headlines written about their meetings. I think we're definitely going to have to wait until draft night to know what's actually going to happen. That's my thoughts. Ron?
Yeah, and Tony, I think just in conversations with you in the past, right? Like, I know you personally are leaning Demidov, and you and I have had discussion about that. And I think we all, as a group of three, have also had that as well. I feel like I've been the only one in the group that was entertaining the Levshunov idea from the start. And I think what the appeal was is he's a right-handed defenseman. It's the one thing this team is painfully missing outside of Seth Jones for the long term, right? They don't have that in the system. That's the one thing they don't have. They have tons of left-handed defensemen and some very good ones, right? We've seen the Alex Vlasic growth, and we've seen what Kevin Korchinski did largely as an 18-year-old in the NHL. But you get that kind of puck moving. He profiles as like he could be a pretty solid two-way defenseman on the right side as well. I mean, you're looking at the potential of having, your new age, because it's not going to be the same, and we can't compare apples to oranges here. But your new Keith and Seabrook and Hjalmarsson like core of defensemen that you can play plug and play in those last 3 spots over the years and have a run. I think that's what is going through Davidson's mind with the Levshunov idea, and that's why I think it is largely still up in the air. That would look really good on the ice. And Levshunov's a guy that very well could, do the Nazar route, essentially. He might go back to Michigan State. He might say, I don't want to go back to Michigan State. Let's go. I'm signing. Let's do this. Maybe he does do that, very Jack Eichel-esque, so to say, and he would fill a need this year and into the future as well. I think the media darling out of it too just maybe made that another check mark of this feels like it could really work in their favor going forward. So that's what I got out of it.
Ron, I just want to add from like an immediacy standpoint. Obviously, there's things to figure out there. I don't know if he's going to, jump right into the NHL this season.
Sure.
And obviously, we know what we're going to get with Demidov. You're not going to see him next year. So I think that sort of plays into sort of the discussion that we had just before this. What's Davidson going to do if he goes and loads up on 2 nice, really offensive, guys in free agency or through the trade route this season? Do you need Demidov? Can you supplement through, what you sign in free agency and then, take that draft pick on Levshunov and let that roll? You do have guys like Nazar who didn't play a full year last year, and we don't exactly know what we're going to get in terms of offense from him and Slaggert. And, hopefully Lucas Reichel returns to form. Maybe you don't need all that. Right now it's painful because you just watched what was on the ice all last year, and it was just the worst offense you can possibly imagine. Now you're going to add potentially a healthy Taylor Hall back to it. So maybe the thought and feelings that I have on why Demidov is the right pick actually leans more towards, hey, no, go take Levshinov. So I'm not married to the Demidov pick. I think he's going to be an outstanding, forward, score a lot of goals, do all the things that we want to see somebody do in a Blackhawks uniform. But I do get where you're coming from. So I did want to preface that as well.
Yep, that's all great analysis on the end of yours. Let me just go full fan-centric take here. And my complete bias, I like forwards more than defensemen and goalies. That is a well-known fact here. And I like the flash as a fan of potentially seeing Demidov and Bedard side by side. So I will stick with that from my fan perspective. But at the end of the day, the ball is in Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks scouting department's hands to go, and whichever route they go. And I'm not going to raise a stink if it's not the one that I want. But once again, thinking down the road, like I was with Jake Guentzel, potential playoff there. Well, imagine if Bedard and Demidov become the chemistry-wise what Patrick Kane and Artemi Panarin were. That's exciting to this forward-centric fan here.
Well said. Poetic, to say the least, Johnny, of that dynamic scoring duo that the Hawks have lacked for quite a few years now as a result of some transactions over the recent seasons.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. So, all right, that'll about wrap up the combine talk. There were some minor signings that have happened in between our last episode and now. Brett Cini, Martin Misiak, Zach Sanford all signed. Anything notable on those guys, Ron? I think Martin Misiak probably the most exciting with the ELC there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Misiak is the biggest one as well. Just because you're starting to see him, Davidson sign his draft picks. Like, we're going to start seeing if these players are they going to develop into the new future of Kyle Davidson as GM, or, is this going to be largely a wait and see kind of thing? So I'm excited. He won't play this year. I think he's going into his age 19 season, so he turns 20 toward the end of the year, I think, for Misiak. He and Lardis should be the same. So guys that we will see in Rockford probably next April, and that's what makes those a little more exciting. But hey, Cini, Sanford, organizational depth, they got something done.
I just want to add that Brett Cini damn well earned his payday. He was outstanding for the Ice Hogs this year. So even if he's just organizational depth, cap tip to him, because that was a nice season that he had there. And I think he got snubbed a little bit in that vote that the Rockford Ice Hogs put out of who was our team MVP. And all the fans are going to go and vote for Drew Comesso. Don't get me wrong. It's a sexy name. And he had himself a good year. But Brett Cini, game in, game out, was the Ice Hogs MVP. Like, come on. That was what it was. So,
yeah. Indeed. Well said. He was really, really good. And, that's beneficial because when you have that guy down there, you're getting your young players to play playoff hockey, even at the AHL level. And that's a huge part of development as well. Something that a team we've mentioned a few times this evening, the Washington Capitals have done really well over the years with a team like a Hershey Bears. It was the same way because they were constantly playing meaningful playoff games, and it helped the Capitals be good for a very long time and ultimately win a Stanley Cup. So, something to think about there.
You brought up a name there on the Washington Capitals, and that leads us into our next segment, Ruffle Some Feathers. I think Tony and I are fairly settled here, but you've got a bone to pick, and it involves them. Go ahead.
I have a bone to pick. They are taking away my favorite website that exists on the planet. I love Cap Friendly. I'm on it daily. I sit on it like it's my own little personal database and just come up with takes, and I send you guys ideas, and it's where the inspiration for GM Ron thrives. For the Washington Capitals to be taking this away from me, and I know there's others. Puckpedia is a great platform. Spotrac is a solid platform as well. But this is personal. This isn't just business appreciation of Cap Friendly. This is personal attachment that they're taking away from me. And I never loved the Capitals to begin with.
Are they your
just
Grinch?
Adds into it.
If July 1st is Christmas morning, are they your Grinch now?
They are my Grinch. They are my Grinch. They are the ones that could steal Christmas for me because they're taking this away from me. I'm very sad. It's the end of a hell of a run with Cap Friendly being the the supplement to the engine that is GM Ron's brain.
So I just want to add on that because I've seen a few conflicting reports. Some outlets have said it ends right after the NHL draft. And then other ones say they want, I think it was Elliot Friedman. Once again, I'll go back to Mr. 97 to 98% accurate, Elliot Friedman. If I read his Sportsnet story correctly, it would stay open through July 5th. So it could still operate for those first few days of free agency when the frenzy usually happens. So Ron, at least maybe you get one last go around, kiss goodbye on all of that front before it goes dark. But I just wanted to clear that up because they're, some of those like aggregator accounts, Puck Report, NHL, start sharing shit out and it gets shared far and wide. And it's like, well, that might not actually be the truth, but they have no standards that hold them to, reporting accurately. So whatever. I just wanted to mention that. Okay. On to our next segment, stick taps. Tony, you got any?
You know what? This is an odd stick tap, but I'm going to give it to Jamie Faulkner for righting the wrong with Chris Vosters in the broadcast booth. We've got to give credit where credit's due.
Right.
And it seems like she was heavily involved in some of these decisions to bring in Rick Ball. We obviously don't know what that's going to be like. I know she gets a lot of flack from us for a lot of other different decisions that are made around the organization. This seemed to be a right one. And I think that's an important stick tap to give. So Jamie Faulkner gets the stick taps for putting together what seems to be a rock star broadcast booth.
Tony, not a weird stick tap at all, because mine kind of plays in depth to yours as well. And that is credit to the Blackhawks front office and the business operations for actually listening to the fans, because there are a lot of organizations where fan, grief and ideas and things like that fall on deaf ears. And I think, unfortunately, I was just going to say, unfortunately, the two of you root for an organization that is very much that way. It's refreshing as a Chicago fan. Like, I think that's why people have enjoyed so much with the Bears. I think this is the most open the front office has ever been with the public. And that little more transparency is appreciated. I think same with the Blackhawks here. That is a huge thing to, again, start gaining back the trust of, I think, this fan base that, it went through kind of a little bit of metaphorical hell in a lot of ways because of all the storylines that were attached to the team and, the once success turned to shit. Like, they've actually listened to the gripes and what we would, as fans, would like to see. And, Tony, you and I are partial season ticket holders with the team, and we like going to the games and we like taking care of all of that stuff as well. We're a little more like comfortable, I think, sitting here like, yeah, this is an investment I want to make because this team's actually like giving us that input as season holders and appreciating the fan base that has stuck through a lot of shit that's dragged the organization through the mud.
It's nice to see anyone own up to a mistake, right? And then it's also nice to be heard, I think, on your front, Ron, where you're coming from on that. I think that's
absolutely
a good way to wrap it up. I will go, you guys covered that one. I will go over to Czechia with the IHF World Championship. Stick taps to Peter Mrazek and Czechia for winning that on home soil. I know he only played in maybe like 2-3 games over there, but he did record one shutout in the preliminary round. Lucas Dostal was leading the charge there in that for the Czechs. But hey, that's got to be a hell of a celebration over there because they treat, we watch it and it's cool to, watch daytime hockey on NHL Network like we talked about on our last episode. It's a big deal over there. They have big parades, they have big celebrations, big watch parties. Everybody's into the game. So that'd be cool for Mr. Peter Mrazek. A nice cherry on top of a successful season for him that saw him get a payday there. So, fire up the Family Guy memes on my front. That's what I've got there. All right, take a look at what's on tap next. Obviously, the Stanley Cup is going on right now with Game 1 last night. Florida jumping out to a 1-0 lead. Your predictions? I can confirm. I'll just start off. I can confirm. Tony can confirm for me that before the series even started, my prediction was Florida in 6. So, not just saying that because they already got one in hand, but that's what I had. You guys, how do you think it's playing out?
We were on the phone. I can #confirm this. Right at puck drop, we got our predictions in there. I'm going Florida. I'm not going to say 6 just because that's too repetitive for Johnny. I hope this thing goes 7. We get all the hockey that we can possibly get after a week off. A fantastic finish, but I'm also taking the Florida Panthers. I don't want to see Connor McDavid get that cup. just out of spite.
That's totally fair. I said this from the beginning. I wanted Florida to win the cup. I said that long before the playoffs. Never necessarily said like, oh, they're going to go all the way or anything like that. I was just like, I think I kind of want them to win because I think they had the team last year to do it, and they kind of deserved it. They did a really ballsy thing as a franchise and went and got Matthew Tkachuk and traded beloved Jonathan Huberdeau, who has just been beat to the ground in Calgary right now. They made a big move to get better, and it's paying off. And I thought they had a good chance. I think it's going to be them, but I do think this thing goes 7. I really do, because that home fee, I think the home advantage because of the distance between cities is actually going to pay off in this series. And I think that's why we're going to get 7 games of hockey. So I think it's going to be the Panthers, but I think it's going the distance.
You're either on Blackhawks legend Gustav Forsling's side or Blackhawks legend Matthias Janmark and Blackhawks cast-off Corey Perry's side. So that's what you got to work with here, Blackhawks fans, for your Stanley Cup final rooting interest there. Other than that, for what's on tap next, NHL awards will be late June. It's insane that they still haven't announced an official date for that, but draft is June 28th and 29th, and free agency, aka Ron's Christmas morning, July 1st. That about wraps it up for this edition of Four Feathers Podcast. Hit me with the final thought, guys, and then we got to get on out of here.
Gentlemen, it is the best time of the year. It is NHL offseason. GM Ron is in full swing, and I am just going to ride these next 3+ weeks like the roller coaster at your favorite theme park, because it is my favorite theme park. NHL offseason. I can't wait. Almost here. We get one great last series of hockey in the Stanley Cup, and then it's GM Ron season, baby.
Final thoughts. I made a big purchase the other day, and I was tipped off to that big purchase by one of the guys on this show, Mr. Ron Luce. Let me know that Winter Classic tickets were on sale for season ticket holders. And I'm not a frequenter of Wrigley Field by any stretch of the imagination, but I can confirm that both Ron and I will be in attendance at the Winter Classic this year. It's going to be fun. Rumors are swirling that we might be joined by one Mr. Patrick Kaminsky as well. So that's out there. Johnny, I haven't talked to you about this at all yet, but my final thought here is, Johnny, you should go to the Winter Classic.
If you guys are all going, that makes it much more incentivized. So we'll have to discuss more off the airwaves, but that would be a fun Four Feathers outing. I agree. I didn't realize that everyone was going. I knew Comiskey was looking into it, and I didn't know about you, but we'll discuss more. Plenty of time until then. But yeah, definitely an option there. My final thought is I want Demidov. That's it. That's all I've got. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of Four Feathers Podcast. Go and subscribe over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet so you don't miss a show in the future. Give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks, baby.